The very thing we used our whole life to get what we want, for something greater to happen.
Absolutely.
Well, that's such a paradox. And the moment you step in, it honors free will. So then the person who's the new age person who's saying, well, I'm just going to wait for my Maserati to come to me. This is not how that works. Once you move into a new state of being and you're creating wealth, in other words, only gold creates gold. Lead doesn't create gold. And our job is to take those base emotions of anger and resentment and fear and anxiety, those base emotions, and transmute them into gold. Because right on the other side of our pain is freedom. Right on the other side of our lack is wealth or abundance. Right on the other side of our fear is courage. It's the same energy. It's just trapped in the body. And when we transmute that energy into something else, right? Now we have available energy to begin to design a destiny with. So then a person who moves into that elegant state of being where they're expanded and they're enriched and they're in love with life, then they can't go back to the old self, because that is their new state of being. So then if you practice that every day, sooner or later it's going to begin to become familiar to you.
And you may feel it, you may see things, you may hear from it. I mean, there are means of communications that can be set up going through that process.
So then if you're creating wealth,
yes,
and you're in the state of being of abundant, you better not be thinking lacking thoughts, because an abundant person would never do that. You can't demonstrate that you're not making choices because you believe that there's not enough, lack of time, lack of energy, lack of money. A wealthy person would never, abundant person would never think of it. You can't feel unworthy and lacking if you're going to be a wealthy person. So by very logic and reason, you got to lay that down and move into this state of being. Now, once you're in that state of being, you can't sit on the couch and wait for the phone call. Once you're in that state of being, you got to start making choices into the unknown from that state of being. You got to trust in the unknown. The moment you don't make the choice, you just doubted your creation. You return back to the known. And so people then, when you're in that state of being, the miraculous happens when you say, okay, I'm going to go for it. But you're not going to go for it as your limited emotional self. You're going to go for it as your unlimited self, and you begin to make those choices, and you step out into the unknown. That's when the miraculous happens, and you say, oh my God, I'm so glad I made that choice. But then waking up in the morning then and priming your brain and body to make that change is the key. There's 2 times the door to the subconscious mind opens up. Excuse me, when we wake up in the morning, and we go to bed at night.
Right.
Why?
In that crossover place.
Because your brain goes from deep delta brainwaves to theta brainwaves to alpha brainwaves to beta brainwaves. Why? And when you go to bed at night, it goes from beta to alpha to theta to delta. And if you can't get there, you're stuck in high beta. It's because you're driving the sports car in first gear, right? So people do whatever they can to get down there. So the brain chemistry works in accordance with this. So when you wake up in the morning and the receptors in the back of your eye pick up light, the moment that happens, your optic nerve sends a signal to the pineal gland, and the pineal gland starts making serotonin. And serotonin is the daytime neurotransmitter. In other words, serotonin gets you up and going. It gets your brain turned on. The moment it starts getting dark at night and your eye is no longer picking up visible light, the mechanism starts to change, and now because there's less light, the optic nerve sends a signal to the pineal gland. The pineal gland takes serotonin and starts carving off a couple methyl groups and turns it into melatonin. And melatonin is the nighttime neurotransmitter. So Sarah gets you up in the morning, and Mel puts you to bed at night. Now, when serotonin increases, your brainwave patterns go into beta. That's because you're going to pay attention more to the outer world. When you're in meditation and you close your eyes and you eliminate light and it's dark in the room and you play music in the background, you put earplugs in, you're getting less sensory data coming in from your environment, so the neocortex is not so preoccupied with trying to create meaning between the outer world and the inner world. You're forgetting about the outer world, and the inner world is where you're cultivating something. So then, when you close your eyes and do your meditation, then your brain waves move into melatonin. But if you're waking up in the morning and you're waking up at 5 in the morning, guess what? Your brain waves will probably be in theta or alpha. You're in your subconscious. You're past the beta thinking, right? We go to bed at night. I have friends that are artists and playwrights and musicians. They stay up till 2 in the morning. They love that 11 o'clock till 2 in the morning. They're nighttime. They're in alpha. They got all these creative ideas. There's, you know, me, I'm a morning person. I wake up. I'm up at 4:30 or 5 in the morning. It's my time to create. I set aside a certain amount of time. That's my time, because the rest of the day I'm serving. So I like to get myself right in the morning, right? So doing that then begins to alter brainwave patterns. Now, if you move from beta to alpha, there'll come an amazing moment where if you do this right, you'll slip into theta. Now, theta is when your body is asleep, but your mind is awake.
Yes.
So think about this. If your body's asleep and you've conditioned it to be the mind through addictions or habits, the moment the body's asleep, it's no longer the mind. So there's no longer any resistance. And that's where instantaneous change takes place. If you go too far, you slip into delta, and that's called deep sleep and restorative sleep. And people say to me, well, I really can't meditate. And I say, really? Where do you meditate? Oh, in bed.
Yeah, well,
get out of bed.
Go. Boom, a trip,
get out of bed, because you're going to go right to delta.
Yeah.
So then, what we noticed in our research, to finish that other thought, is that there comes a moment when you're in that coherent level of alpha that all of a sudden you slip into theta. And all of a sudden, when theta turns on, all of a sudden you start seeing this amazing change take place. And the body becomes so relaxed, and the energy centers, the sympathetic nervous system, switches on. But instead of switching on like you're being chased by a tiger, or switching on like having an orgasm, or ejaculating, or switching on for whatever reason, it's switching on in balance with the parasympathetic nervous system.
Yes.
So the parasympathetic nervous system settles the body down, but now the sympathetic nervous system turns on, and here comes that energy, and whoosh, it travels right up the central nervous system. And when it hits the brainstem, switches on what's called a thalamic gate, the reticular activating system. All that energy now hits the train station, the docking station where all the neurons go, and boom, it hits the neocortex, and now you're producing gamma brainwave patterns. And gamma brainwaves are super conscious brainwave patterns. In other words, the inner world is the real world. The experience is so profound energetically that you never forget the moment. That's when you rewrite the program. That lady we showed having ecstasy and in a state of ecstasy in their meditation, she was in high gamma.
Right.
We were watching her, I was watching her go, we were going alpha, alpha, theta, theta, theta. We looked at each other and we were like, oh no, Jeffrey and I, and all of a sudden, boom, here it comes, gamma. Off the page. Yeah,
and this is something that often you see in really deep meditating Buddhist monks, for example.
Exactly.
I mean, that's where it's reflected
Coherent
most.
Gamma.
Yeah.
So then the moment that happens, then that's energy.
Yeah.
And the sympathetic nervous system now is in complete balance with the parasympathetic nervous system. The thalamic gate is open. The subconscious is out of the way. It's released. And the energy is now traveling to the thinking brain, and the person's becoming super aware. You just took the dimmer switch and went from 20 watts to 50 watts, which is normal, to 100 watts.
Right.
And we saw that in all the redness in the brain. Her brain was full of energy, and she was in a state of catharsis. She could control that, but why would she want to? Now she's having an orgasm in her head. Her brain is having the orgasm, and it's not chemical. It's electromagnetic. It's electromagnetic. Now, here's what happens. The moment that happens, melatonin has to change. Now it starts turning into all of these amazing neurotransmitters. Melatonin is transmuted in the alchemical factory of the pineal gland, and it makes a chemical that is one of the strongest antioxidants known to man. In other words, just a little tweak on the melatonin molecule, and now you have an anti-aging, anti-cancer, anti-heart disease, antimicrobial, anti-neurodegenerative disease chemical that's floating through your bloodstream. That's the first thing.
HGH or something? What is it?
No, it's an antioxidant. It's all those things.
Oh,
so
wow.
You just take a methyl group and twist it, and it turns out. Then if you take melatonin and you change it again, it creates a phospholuminescent chemical, the same chemical found in the electric eel. Now, what is that? The neurons are just filled with energy, and there's a glow. And the neurons now are heightened, and they're storing energy, and that's what gives those colors and patterns during the experience. And if you switch that molecule again, it turns into the chemical that you find in mammals that are hibernating. In other words, no sex drive, no appetite, the body's in stasis. You're no longer having any drives. And what a time to dream. What a time to create a future, when the body is no longer the mind. Take that chemical and tweak it again, and it's the most powerful hallucinogenic known to man. And now you're talking about the God molecule. You're talking about the inner world as the real world, and now you are walking into a dimension. And this is where you go from space-time into time-space. And that's the vision quest, or the lucid experience, or whatever mystical moment that has been talked about for antiquity. And it takes a little bit to get people to this point, but when the neurotransmitters change, the chemicals are a downward causation of a shift in consciousness. And when that happens, holy hell, because the person will never be the same. I've had experiences, I understand them, and you can't go back to business as usual after a few of those.
Okay, and you just dropped it in passing early on, that you have had these experiences where you just haven't say, oh, when I'm out of my body. Okay, whoa, hold on. What were you saying? So I assume that also this is the crossover period that makes that kind of experience available to one, right?
Yeah, I think, my interest is to demystify this. Right?
So let's demystify it.
I mean, information, you teach people information, you teach them how to do it, and then it creates transformation. If we can measure transformation, that's more information to teach transformation better, and we can close the gap. So, in one of our advanced workshops, we actually did extensive meditation. One of the things I've realized in my own personal experience is that you have to go past the point where you want to lay down in your meditation. There comes a point when you want to lay down, or you want to give up or stop. If you go a little bit past that point and you sit up a little bit longer, and then you lay down, and you can do it early in the morning, because the neurotransmitters are just right. They're not quite melatonin, they're not quite serotonin, they're in between. And if you can get up and do your meditation early enough and sit up for an extended period of time and then lay down, the light show is going to begin.
Yes.
And so I started having these mystical experiences a couple years ago, and I would literally, they were so unusual that I had to go back to my quantum physics books and begin to look at what exactly was going on. But I wasn't taking any drugs. My brain was the pharmacy, in a sense. And I was having these Kundalini experiences, and it was like I was getting plugged into a light socket, like someone plugged me into the electricity socket, and I could feel every single cell of my body turning on all at once, and it was like somebody took that dial and turned it up, and it was amazing. So there was a signature energetically of love that came with that.
Yes.
It was the thing that I became the most interested in, because when I started having these experiences, Regina, the first thing I realized is I got this all wrong. I really had it all wrong, because this intelligence is so incredibly loving, and it's who we are. We're just separate from it. We're particle instead of wave. And when your nervous system tunes into that and the electromagnetism comes with it, the only way you can describe it is that you are so present, so conscious, and so in love with the idea of being alive that you don't want anything else. You can't want in that moment, because if you started to want, you would lose the feeling. So you can't want. All you can do is be, right, and love. So I started having these experiences, and then I started thinking, well, maybe we should be able to teach this. So I started doing the research on the neuroendocrinology and what it took and the brain chemistry at the time. And then I had to start explaining what the heck was happening to me. So that's how I got involved in it.
Wow, I mean, this brings up so many different paths we can go on. And one of them, we were talking at the very beginning about our nonlinear selves that go from space-time to time-space. And you've had these, you call them slippages back and forth between the two. I've had some of these as well. And these experiences involuntarily. Meditation, I just need to lie down for a minute, and you think you're going back to sleep, and you're rolling in a field of plaid, or whatever. But what kind of slippage were you talking about between these? Well, I won't say dimensions, into this nonlinear space.
Well, I think the biggest lie we've been ever told is that we're linear beings living a linear life.
Yes.
The moment I
Couldn't agree
had my
more.
first couple of these experiences, I know we are dimensional beings living a very dimensional experience of reality. And all of this indoctrination is to keep us from that, because once the game is up, you can't ever go back to being the same person. So this reality, this dimension that we live in, is called space-time. Space is eternal. Space is the field. And you and I experience time by moving through space. So if I'm going to go here to the door, I have to get up and walk through space, and when I walk through space, I'm going to experience time. I have an interview later on today. I know it's going to happen because I'm going to linearly walk through time, space to experience that time. So in this dimension, we could say that space is the field and time is the river. And so we experience time as we move through space. Got it? Mm-hmm. In the inverse reality, it's actually opposite. In other words, time is everywhere. Time goes on forever. And you experience space when you move through time. Let me see how I can say it another way. So if time is the field and space is the river, then all of space is enfolded in time. So when you change your speed in this dimension, if we go fast from here to the door, the faster we move, the less time it takes, right? So we can change time by moving through speed. Well, in this dimension where everything is vibration and electromagnetism, the faster your vibration is, the speed, the different levels of space you experience. So all of space is stacked on top of each other here. It's all happening in now because time is everywhere. There is no time. So everything's happening in this moment. And so different levels of consciousness and different levels of energy allow us to experience these different levels of space. So the you that's in the Egyptian period and the you that's in the future is all lined up simultaneously. And when you start slipping through these dimensions, you live. And when I say live, I'm saying that it is real as this. And you know who you are.
Yes.
And the person that you're married to, or the person that you work with, or your best friend is wearing a different face. And you understand your agreement that you negotiated in all of those other places. So you have a few of those experiences, and you start to no longer care about your checking account, the car you drive, what you look like, because you realize that you look like somebody else in another place. And some of the issues and some of the challenges that you have in this life, you're experiencing in that exact same life. And the choices you make here affect the choices that are happening there. And we could say that there's only past lives and future lives in this dimension, in space-time. In that dimension, there is no past lives. It's all happening now. I don't know how else to say it, but as you begin to change your consciousness, you can slip into different spaces, different realities, and experience aspects of yourself that are just like this wonderful kaleidoscope of possibilities.
And when we do this, when we go into what we commonly call a past life experience, via whatever means, spontaneously through regression or whatnot, there does seem to be this element of time associated with it, because you could look it up in the history book, like the young fellow, James, I've forgotten his last name, who was the pilot during World War II, came back and went to meet with all his mates, and now they're in their 70s, and he's, 8, 9 years old, all full memory. And you could say, in a linear sense, that happened 60 years ago, or whatnot. But you're saying, it's so abstract to say it didn't happen 60 years ago, because it's all happening right now.
It's still happening.
It's still happening.
He just brought the memory from there. So
it's almost like a theoretical debate on one level, even if it's true, right? I mean, does it give us some advantage to thinking past, future?
I think one of the cool things about it is that you can experience future times too, and that we think that time is fixed. You know, we think it's linear. It's not fixed.
No.
And so you have to have the moment to understand, when you have the experience, that that what you're doing right now is actually affecting all of your past, present, and future lives. Your moment in your meditation, your moment to give, your moment to serve, your moment to love right now affects both your future as well as your past. And when you get a little glimpse, there's the point. Whether it's the past life or the now life that's in the past, or possibly in the past, when you have that moment of expression of self, you bring that back with you. And the knowledge of you as a soul is amplified. You have more understanding to help you execute that this is an illusion that we're living in. So it no longer becomes about getting to the top of the heap or succeeding or being the most whatever. All of a sudden you're realizing now it's about how you're going to make a difference, or how you're going to contribute, or how you're going to cultivate an aspect of self to help you in this life and all of those other lives that are happening simultaneously. So we've created the conditions for this in one of our advanced workshops, and boy, the stories are off the chart. And because people just get it, they just get who they are.
And when you get that, when you're in sync and that connection is intact, you're given very clear information regularly on which to make decisions. That information flows through. I mean, for everyone it's different. Some people say, oh, my guides were speaking to me or whatnot. It could be also our higher self speaking to us.
Sure.
It can be an external being speaking, but the point is, once you go into that state of grace, as it were, where you're in that open field of possibilities, you begin to see, hear, simply know, as information is being flowed through to you. And then free will seems to be more how we handle the choice as to what to do with that information as it comes from higher source.
Well, knowledge is empowerment. Knowledge about self is self-empowerment.
Right.
So, but I'm not talking about knowledge like you may want to argue quantum superimposition, right?
Yeah.
Some people do that, and I've sat and drank martinis with quantum physicists to sunrise, and nobody's changed at the end of it.
Right.
But having the experience of quantum superimposition, which is what that is, that you begin to realize there's a oneness to all of this.
Yes.
That I don't know how else to describe that, but there's a oneness that allows us to understand through experience the mystery of who we are.
Yes.
So the knowledge then becomes the precursor to the experience. But the truth is, the biology, the neuroendocrinology, the quantum physics, the brainwave explanation, the physiology, all has a justifiable pattern that we can begin to emulate, we can begin to teach, and for certain times you have to go past your fatigue. That's what I was trying to say earlier, like the Zen monks that take the Zen monks and give them a koan and make them sit up for 3 days and focus on the koan, and they're thinking with their conscious mind, and they're pushing them with love, and all of a sudden they finally surrender. Well, what is that surrender?
Yes.
The ego finally just gets out of the way, and that's the moment the monk has the realization, or the martial artist does something amazing, or the athlete, or something happens that's not a greater aspect of energy through you. So then time stops when that occurs, because all of a sudden things slow down, or the moment is elongated is the best way to say it. And so when the moment is elongated like that, Einstein said time and space are not conditions in which we live, but modes in which we think. And relative time is altered, and you have access to more time. That's the only way I can say it. Yeah.
No, that makes sense, because when you're in that state, that altered state of consciousness, or you might say normal state of consciousness, where there is that expansion and that no thing, time, you experience time totally differently.
Absolutely.
It's as though there is no, well, there's no such thing as time. It's just this state of grace that is perpetual. You have to almost jerk yourself back into this hard and fast linear reality from that place, because who wants to come out of it?
Sure.
Yet, the real beauty of life, the real dance is to open that, connect with it, and maintain that while we're living in this linear third-dimensional experience, right?
I always say, listen, you have a mystical experience. If you can't integrate it into your life, it's not mystical. I mean, someone who's, schizophrenic has a lot of mystical experiences, and they are mystical experiences, but you can't function in your world. What good is it?
Right.
So you got to be able to take that experience and methodically then say, ask the question, well, who am I, right? We're only limited by the questions. And then becoming possessed by wanting to know the answers and wanting to go deeper. I think that after a few experiences like that, parts of our brain that have been dormant, now again, this is my theory, parts of our brain that have been shut off or dormant are turned on. And now you're looking through a different lens now, because you only perceive what's mapped in your brain neurologically and what you emotionally have experienced. So the emotion becomes the filter, and the circuitry becomes the focus. And so then you have an experience of space-time and time-space. All of a sudden you activate the circuitry. You're looking, the lens changes from experience, and the body changes from experience. The circuitry changes from experience. You're not focusing so much on just that particle. You're focusing on the wave and the possibilities. Mm-hmm. So your lens broadens and your acuity sharpens, and that then alters your perception, which alters your beliefs, which alters your attitudes, which alters your thoughts and feelings, which is altered from your memories or experiences.
So let's talk about Kundalini then. Where does the Kundalini experience fit in this whole blossoming and moving the energy upward and upward until there's a connection with the nonlinear self?
Well, I think, I was talking about it a little bit when I was saying that the energy travels, but my experience of the Kundalini is actually evoking a sleeping giant. It's actually evoking that energy, that sleeping dragon in there. And so if you're 5% conscious mind and 95% subconscious mind, and the body has been conditioned to be the mind, and you memorize emotions from your past, you have an experience that creates a mood and a temperament and becomes a personality because you're reacting with one long emotional state, and your body's in the past, right? So the emotions then we wear layer by layer, and emotions are energy. So there's all this energy stored in the body. So here's 5% and here's 95%. So then as you begin to coax that energy from the body as an energy, going from survival to creation, from particle to wave, from matter to energy, and you have a target to begin to elevate that energy and draw it up, whether through a breath or through a discipline in some way, your breath or your intention becomes the act of using your body as an instrument of consciousness. And instead of letting that energy leak out in an orgasm or leak out in digestion or leak out, none of those are bad, by the way. But if you're making the conscious effort to turn that energy and drive it in a different direction or draw it up in a different direction, that the action with intention will start to disturb that energy. It'll start to loosen that energy. And if you and I can get out of the way, like really as an identity become nobody, no thing, no time, it's selfless,
right,
then energy has to go back from whence it came. And that 95% of where the emotions, addictions are stored and the habituations as patterns of information are locked in there, and the particles are going to unravel into energy. And that unraveling of energy is going to go from these lower hormonal centers, hit the heart, continue up, intercourse with the brain, and then it's going to draw a field. And that field is going to draw right back up, and you're going to start to create this torus.
Yeah.
And that's the functional creation of the universe. You become your own individual torus, your own individual electromagnetism. And in our workshops we show pictures of this. When people get what they're doing, it's not a blind act of Kundalini. And we had one lady just have the most amazing Kundalini in one of our workshops. I was watching her, I was watching her do it. And we do a certain degree of discipline with it. I was watching her and I knew it was going to happen. And that energy went right into her brain, and then it happened again, and it happened again. And we sat down and had dinner she came and sat with us at the dinner with my staff. And she leaned over to my assistant and she said, "Another one of those and I'm not going to need a husband."
Yeah, exactly. Now, oddly, I had this strange experience with the notion of Kundalini. This was many years ago, probably 25, 30 years ago. And I was told by a respected intuitive source that not to engage in Kundalini yoga. And I thought, no, I didn't know anything about it, so it didn't mean much to me. Years later, not paying attention, a girlfriend invites me to a yoga class. It turns out it's Kundalini yoga. We're doing the breath of fire and so forth. But what happened to me was that I separated. I'm sitting next to myself, and I can't find my way back in my body. There were two of me there. Couldn't find my way back in my body, couldn't find my shoes, couldn't figure out how to write a check or how to drive home. It was quite a deal before I could get it together enough, and they just kept the building open until I could reintegrate with self. So what's happening there?
Well, I mean, how many bodies do you have? How many dimensions are there? So you just woke up in another body.
Yeah.
That's all. I mean, really, that's what happened. But the interesting thing behind it all is that this whole idea that Kundalini is bad for you, that's an old stigma that you're going to get possessed, and there's just a bunch of crap that goes on with that. But listen, when that energy starts to move, it's a moving locomotive. And you are going to be baptized in fire. And I'm going to tell you from experience, I've had hundreds of cases, hundreds of experiences. And I have been knocked unconscious, I've been knocked through doors, I have been electrocuted, I don't know, it just goes on.
Sounds fun so far.
And I could control it, but why would I want to?
Right.
I mean, why would I want to control that? I mean, so the first time it happens, there's an element of fear. Like it's an unknown, so people get afraid. But if I'm telling you, if you surrender into it completely, it'll baptize you in a level of energy that's off the chart, and you can't return back to the same self after that experience. And when that electromagnetism lights up every cell of your body, and the flash of light, and the next thing you know, you're altered. That is really using the body in the proper way as an instrument. Now you're beginning to marry conscious mind with subconscious mind. Now you're beginning to become more electric and less energy. And now you're creating a level of coherence around you that creates reverse entropy. Now
Interesting,
you're no longer living by the laws of thermodynamics. You're living by the laws of energy. And I don't care if you eat the chocolate bar. I don't care if you drink the poison. I don't care. Your body is immune now because your body is more of an energetic field now. And that's what the mystics have been talking about.
Okay, so of all the work that you've done, the books you've written and so forth, which of the books would you recommend for people who are listening to this saying, yes, I want to have a direct relationship with my true self. I want to bring the Kundalini energy up and go for the wild ride of expansion and so forth. Which of your work or other work would you recommend that people start turning to?
Well, as far as my work, I think Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, How to Lose Your Mind and Create a New One is a good foundation for people. I think, though...
It's an excellent book,
I think if you take that knowledge and you begin to do some of the meditations, it'll begin to wet your whistle. But come to the workshops, because the workshops, I push people where they normally stop. Because right on the other side of that is the miraculous. So you'll learn how to do that in our workshops that we teach, and people are doing it, and people are having amazing experiences.
And it's being proven out because you have all this wonderful technology to prove that it's happening.
And, well, that's what I want to do. I mean, as I said, information. If you can teach and apply that information and instruct people how to use that information, you're going to see transformation. If we can measure that transformation in EEGs or heart math or coherence or whatever we use, Konstantin's work, Dr. Konstantin Karakov's work, that new information that we just measured helps us to teach transformation better, and we can continue then to close the gap, and that's when you start demystifying it, so that you don't have to be a monk, you don't have to be a nun, you don't have to be a spiritual person. You could be a person that works in an office, but you're passionate about it, and now everybody has access to it.
Yes. Okay, we only have about 5 minutes left, and one area I really wanted to get into, but we're having so much fun, it's not happened till now, and that is our kids. So we all have a possibility with our children and our grandchildren to essentially baptize them into this new way of connecting with self and not to accept the societal structures and, as you say, the entropy that comes with it. What you raised 3 kids. What are the top tenets that you adhered to in raising them?
Give children the facts, they interpret the laws. If they're young enough and their brains are so neuroplastic, they're functioning in the theta and alpha. For the most part, all that information is going in unanalyzed, so it's encoded into the subconscious. Never, ever teach your children anything that you cannot do. Get down there and do it with them and watch this little soul catch on as quickly as you. Next, if you want your children to be great, demonstrate greatness. They have a type of neurons called mirror neurons.
Mirror neurons.
Mirror neurons are called empathy neurons. When you're feeding your kid when they were young, you took the spoon and you went like this. And you were doing that because you wanted them to model your behavior. A lioness who's teaching her cubs to hunt shows them how to do it, and when they watch the lioness do it, they turn on the same circuits as if they're doing it. So you can't say to your kid, clean your room and have a messy room. You can't say, stop being an emotional basket case, and you're an emotional basket case, because they're watching your mirror neurons. And there's research to show that when people watch sports players, that they turn on the same parts of the brain as if they're doing it. Watching a great golfer makes your game better. Watching a great dancer makes you a better dancer. Watching a great parent execute greatness makes the person a great person. So then, mirror neurons, then, the fastest path to enlightenment as a parent or a grandparent is to demonstrate greatness with your children in every area of your life. And if you can't do it, get down on their level and say, I'm trying to overcome my own frustration and anger today. And they will say to you, I'm trying to overcome my judgment and anger. And they will tell you, and then say, okay, let's make a pact. Let's work on this together. How are you going to do it? And let's create a strategy and repeat it to me. Well, I'm going to try this. Why don't you try that? And now you have a game that they're in. Use stories as allegories to teach them, because as they begin to think about and associate and plan their behaviors through the allegory, they'll identify with the main characters. So when you understand what your child's limitation is and you tell them a story of a little child in a mystical land in a faraway place that's overcome something, and you take them through the process on how they did it, they will demonstrate it, because you're installing the circuits in their brain to allow them to follow that path, because now the knowledge is there.
They are a mirror, essentially, for their experience around the mirror neurons. I had not heard the term mirror neurons before. Okay, one last question, a couple minutes left here. You have traveled in the past as we call it, the future, into the now, but what looks like it would appear to be the future. You're looking at these children now. We're looking at what's happened to them. How do you see, in terms of all of this ability to express and create, the humanity of the future?
I think there's a strong intellectual division. Some children are lost in the quagmire of technology and the emotional rush they get from dopamine, texting, and adrenaline from computer games. They're going to look for things in their life to make them pleasurable and happy, and when crisis and trauma happens, they're going to start using things outside of them to change. The other half of the children are asking the bigger questions. Why are we doing this? How did we end up here? What is the meaning? And those kids are more sensitive, they're more in touch, they're more ethics-based. They could care less about the same things that adults our age care about. They don't care about competition. They don't care about success. They care about meaning. And meaning equals values. And I think that other half, those children that are interested in values, will begin to really change the paradigm. And they're our future, so invest in them. Invest in their ideas.
Is that what your kids are like?
Yeah, they're pretty cool kids.
My son, too, is one of the people I most admire for being brave enough to let the moment just show itself to him.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
You're
I appreciate
welcome.
it. Until next time.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much.